Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to the sessions on data. What we are doing is every week we are just meeting and we are trying to cover different areas of data as part of the overall data architecture and data frameworks. And we are taking the data, the CDMP framework or the Dharma book of reference as primarily one of the key, uh, one of the reference guide that we are going through while we're going through each of these different areas of data, right? And over the last few sessions, we have already covered on data management, data handling ethics, on primarily also on data governance, data architecture, data modeling and lineage, data modeling, data design, data storage operations aspects, and data security, data integration, interoperability, right? So slowly and slowly, we are moving to different areas of data. And today, again, a very interesting topic, which is very much relevant as part of your data office or any of your data architectures and frameworks in the organizations that yes, I will also try to speak about some of the use cases, where document and content management now takes a very important role. So as part of this, what we're going to do is we'll first understand what is document and content management. Now, as the name suggests itself, if you see what is document and content management, so it is more with respect to the different types of documents that you have. And if you know, like document will have a lot of data sets itself, but it might be the form of unstructured data. It would be also some kind of a structured data, and then semi-structured data could also be there. So the entire processes, the entire life cycle, with respect to the data, right from the point where the documents are being captured, they've been stored, accessed, and the use, for so that it basically covers all of it. Now, and a very simple example could be like, for example, when you're opening a account in a bank, let's say it could be a savings account, it could be a loan account, any of these accounts, you see that you fill the application form, basically give all your documents, right? So these documents are in the form of photocopies, and then sometimes they attach this to these. They will be attaching this to the application form, and then sometimes they might require some additional documents. Let's say, for example, marriage certificate or birth certificates and all. So it starts from that stage where the collection, the captures happens, but now once they also have to process these documents. These documents would be sent it over to some processing team, who would be verifying these details. ID, account numbers, all these details would be useful. Application ID would be getting created. All of it is primarily will be useful, and then it gets created, you can be discarding it, right? Because supposedly these documents, the regulator mandates that it has to be sent to them as well. So you will have to send it to them. You will have to retain these documents for a certain amount of time. If you know, like, for example, if you have taken a loan account, so let's say the loan paying period is 30 years. Now, they will have all your original agreements with you. The banks keeps that record with you, them. And the property details, the property documents, everything is there with the bank, even your car loans. And now it is not very easy for them to say that, okay, application is being created, I'll just discard it. So they will have to store these documents till the point that, the document has to be returned back once document is being done. So primarily these all activities, as you can see, requires the storage, access, use. I will have to archive and keep it. So that is where document management is a very integral part of your entire any kind of your data architectures, right? So these kind of things, if you see, we will also have to maintain the integrity. We will have to see that whenever the documents are required to be retrieved from the entire, the entire what you have, the repositories and all, then you should be able to take them out. You should be able to, process it. So these kind of things, all is where the document and content management is there. Because if you know why it is called as content management, because the data which is there, sometimes it is not purely only data. There is a lot of content, so content would be in the form of some kind of a files, some these kind of things. So the documents, content. So content, data is one type of a content. There could be other type of contents also, which could be there in that. So this entire aspect is being covered, and that's the reason this has been taken out as a separate exercise because records management, document management. So these are all, even ISO standard. If you see 15489, these kind of standards have also come up with respect to which basically tells you the entire what are the best practice around it. So definition, as we have discussed, it's basically the planning, implementation, and the control activities which are there as part of the overall life cycle that you will be required to have. Now, what are the goals? So if you can see what are the legal obligations and customer expectations regarding the records management, like I am keeping these records with you. Tomorrow, when I want to retrieve it, there's something I should be able to get it back. It's very similar to, your social media platforms. Now, why you want to keep your pictures, your images and all with Facebooks and, like the Google Drives and all. What they're doing. They're basically capturing and storing all your documents or your memories, right? So why are you doing that? Because tomorrow, if I want to fetch it, if I want to you retrieve it back very easily, I should be able to take it, right? So the entire goal is there are legal obligations, there are customer expectations, that comes in also. Then second is to how I can start ensuring there is the effective and efficient storage retrieval at possibilities, right? Now, when I'm storing my, documents on a Google Drive or in a OneDrive or in a SharePoint location, one of the key expectation is I should be able to retrieve it much faster. The why I don't want to keep it in a hard disk, a portable hard disk, because the portable hard disk being more volatile, I might lose it. Why I want to keep it in a cloud device because it's very portable, I can access it from anywhere. So these kind of things is where the efficient storage and retrieval play a very important role. Then also to ensure the integration capabilities between the structured and unstructured, right? So for the unstructured data, can I try retrieving some of the structured data that will help me to identify and classifying these contents, in the documents? That's a very important thing, so there is always a kind of, you'll see any organization you see, they will try to retrieve the unstructured contents or the structured component, structured data from the unstructured data, so that I can be able to apply a lot of these controls. I should be able to apply a lot of these maskings and encryptions, So like, for example, you even take a chatbot right nowadays, which you can see there are use cases where I don't want let's say if I'm as a customer, I'm entering my details, credit card details, confidential details, the chat agent should not be able to get it, so it should be in a kind of masked, it should be in a kind of a encrypted so that the final end user isn't. So I'm trying to prevent a lot of these data leakages that is possible, right? So the whole ultimate objective, as you can see, is the security and the quality of the documents, the contents which are there. It requires it's a very important aspect. And as I was mentioning, the governance architectures and the metadata components all will be whenever you're designing any kind of a records management kind of a exercise, this is primarily these some of the key important factors that come in. Now, what are some of these inputs, activities, and the deliverables around that? So as we go further, we will see what are different types, what are different people who will provide all of these information. Like, for example, your social media, your campaigns team, your application teams, who will be saying that the documents which are coming in the electronic formats or the paper formats, these kind of things, you will see a lot of these things will come in, and you'll see organizations which deals with a lot of these applications and all, like telecom industries and all. Also you'd see a lot of applications coming up or now which is they're trying to digitalize it, but if you see and linking it with Aadhaar and all reduces a lot of documents. But if you see banking as an industry, if you take some of the other places where government institutions and all, where a lot of times you deal with physical documents, right? So that is where your document management plays a very important, is still very relevant. And different types of activities we'll discuss, right? From the life cycle management for records, the records management as an area. How do you define an entire content strategy across it? How do you define the content handling policies? the e-discovery as one of the things across your endpoints. Try to do a automated discovery of your these documents and then classifying how you're defining the entire information architecture and line life cycle across them, right? So these kind of things, as we go further, we'll see as part of the entire this entire chapter. Now, what are some of the primary drivers, business drivers? We have discussed few of them, but just to, because we have one specific area around this. So one is the important thing is regulatory compliance. I was mentioning you this example, right? That, now the RBI mandates or the regulator is mandating that, whatever the applications are coming in, those have to be physically sent over to the RBI for verifications, right? So that is where, any kind of, in case if there is any kind of a litigation request to begin. So these are some things, from a regulatory perspective, it is required. Now, sometimes, when I was saying with respect to litigation, why it is important, because what happens is, a lot of times when there are legal cases, where, let's say, for example, husband, wives filing case against each other, or there are family disputes and all. So these are the times where these documents are actually being fetched and they have been referenced, so it cannot be just, I can just delete those documents once it has been done. So there is a certain kind of a guidelines that has been mandated by the regulator and, regulations, and primarily we have to abide to them, right? Then ability, so this is where I was mentioning why, for the litigation and discovery perspective, it is very much important that I should be able to find these electronics records. I should be able to find these records in a timely manner. I cannot just, you see that if there are those registers officers, I'm not sure how many of you have seen it, but when you go to these archives places, there are files, but huge number of files which are there. Now, if it is, I will just be keeping all of these files, till the point when it has been required that I can start archiving, or I can start, destroying them. But till that time, I'll have to keep you. So you'll see that there is racks of so much files, and now I should be able to identify where is each of my file being placed, because retrieval is very important, right? So these kind of things, with respect to the retrieval, whenever the discovery plays a very important role, and we have seen about metadata as well. So metadata plays a very important role. When you start capturing and doing a e-discovery, you do records retention. All of this is something, all of it will be tied together. You'll be able to. And then gaining efficiencies plays a very important one of the business driver across each of these processes, how we are able to streamline the processes, how we are able to manage the workflows, how we are able to eliminate some of these repetitive manual tasks, how we are able to collaborate between them. So whatever is happening with respect to your structured data, the discovery, identification, and so on, which we have seen, the similar kind of drivers are there with your records management piece as well. Now, what are some of the goals, right? As we have seen, so one is the most important goal is the effective and efficient retrieval of the data that we want. Now, a lot of these is in the unstructured form, in the paper formats, in the documents, right? So even efficient and effective retrieval should be done. Then ensuring the integration capabilities between the structured and unstructured data. So that is something we should be able to do. Legal obligations we should be able to comply with. And there are certain kind of guiding principles that it has, So one of the very important aspect is, as we have seen, that there is a life cycle, right? So it starts with let's say we take the example of application opening. So it starts with the branch, the branch manager, branch user, tellers, and all, through which they would be collecting the documents. They would be, doing capturing these details and entering, right? Then it gets passed to the backend operations team, maybe at the head office. So the head office would be doing it, and they would be storing it, entering it into document management systems. They will have to send it to the regulator, right? Then from on the document management systems that is there, then you also have the facility managements who might have to move these documents to a specific archive on storage area. In that storage, there are specific people who are responsible for storing these documents. So everyone has a role. Everyone, it is not like one person takes care of this entire life cycle. Across this entire life cycle, you will see that different people would be there who has different types of roles to play. So that's the reason there are different types of policies and procedures that are associated. Then experts in handling of records and content should be fully engaged in policy and planning. So they should be, that's the reason it's, it might be sounding so simple, but it's not so easy because there are so many, processes that would be part of it. There are so many activities. So who have good understanding of these processes, who have good legal understanding, regulatory understanding, these are all the people who should be, part of this entire exercise. Now, primarily in 2009, when Arma International, which is again a non-profit organization, they came up with the generally accepted record keeping principles, which is the GARP principles. Now, GARP, there is another, which is a risk professional, so there is a group of risk professionals that is different. This GARP is generally accepted record keeping principles. So it will describe how this businesses records should be maintained. So they came up with certain kind of an information governance framework, and there are different types of associated metrics that came with. So one was the principle of accountability, where the organization should be assigning a kind of a very senior executive so that they are able to appropriate individuals across the different policies and procedures. They came up with different types of principles. So one was with respect to the accountability. They came up with the principle of integrity, so that the information that is being captured should be authentic and reliable. Then they came up with the principle of protection, where they said that the program should be constructed in such a way that there is a reasonable level of protection, that we can enforce. Then a principle of compliance, that we should be comply with the applicable laws and binding authorities, as well as the internal organizational policies. Then we have the principle of availability that says that the organization should be having information that we should be able to ensure timely, efficient, accurate retrieval of this information. Then we have the principle of retention. So where we say that we should be able to retain the information that we are collecting for an appropriate time for a specific duration. We, after taking into consideration all the operational, legal, regulatory requirements as well. Then we have the principle of disposition, where we say that now we should start providing secure and appropriate disposition of this information once the purpose, once the guidelines or the time duration for which it is being required to store is being completed. And the principle, lastly, the principle of transparency, where we say that it should be documented in such a way with respect. It should be clarity. There should be a very clear understanding. There should be a clarity in what has been written, and it should be made available to everyone. People should be able to understand it. They should be able to support and be part of this entire. Now, as part of this, as the entire document and content management, so there are certain kind of key concepts that are associated. So we'll speak some of these to understand it more better. Now, content, it's not content. Yes, obviously, it's content. Now, what is content? Now, content is nothing but, it could consider in the form of a document, so it's very similar to like a container of storing the information, right? So content refers to the data as well as the information that we are getting from the data with respect to the files, the documents, websites, or any kind of place the data stores through which we will be able to retrieve the data and information. Now, in the earlier days, content used to be mostly associated with respect to documents, but it could be there in files, inside your files and all. Now, if you see your entire document management, one of the key NoSQL types of databases also, if you see, which is your document databases. This is nothing but they are basically trying to capture these documents, the information, the data which you have in your documents, like MongoDB and all, if you know, which are very popular document databases. So what they are doing is they are trying to capture these contents, right? Now, within and what is content management? So this is the entire processes, the techniques and the technologies that we will be useful, the entire management component, right? From organizing, categorizing, structure the information, all of is part of the content management, right? The entire life cycle with respect to what are the control processes that would be required for the creation and modification of content. At the same time, in case if there is any kind of minor or occasional changes, so all of this, the entire end-to-end components is being included as part of your content management. At the same time, content management is very much important with respect to your websites and portals as well, because normally when you have so much, like for example, you have these, the social media websites, right? So we want to have the keys and the values associated, because there is so much of text data, structured data, unstructured images, audio files, video files, all of it. So proper indexing based on the keywords, based on the keys, as well as organizing this entire data into taxonomies is very much important, right? So this kind of things you will see that organizations, they also have the enterprise content management frameworks, the ECM frameworks that we normally say, which captures a lot of these things. Then we also have the content metadata, which is plays a very important role. Like you have seen that metadata, why metadata is important, because it gives you data about your data, and we've seen an entire chapter on metadata management. So without metadata, it might not be possible to inventory and organize the entire data and try to understand and go through each of these data one by one. But what metadata does is metadata tries to provide you a lot of this information very easily. Now, this metadata for the unstructured data would be primarily what are some of the things that you will have. So you might have the formats, in which the data has been residing. It could be in the form of JSONs, XMLs, in the form of PDF files, whatever the formats is there. Then what's the search ability? Which kind of search engines that you might use? What, like for you have Elasticsearch and all, which can help you to start getting a lot of these access to this under unstructured data as well. Then the self-documentation perspective. So we should have the metadata in such a way that it should be self-documented, and minimal development should be part of it. Then what kind of existing patterns, there could be existing methods and patterns that we can adopt, and we can adapt to use it. Then what kind of the subjects or people, the stakeholders who are part of it, the content subjects, who is creating, who is using, who is, defining, all of these kind of details would be captured. And requirements could be more with respect to what is the requirement for this document, why it has been required. So these kind of details would be the metadata details that would be captured. Then you also have content modeling. So just like we have data modeling, right? So where we try to have the relationships build up. So content modeling is the very similar exercise where we are trying to logically group these contents or content concepts into these different types, attributes, and the data types that we have, the relationships. Now, this is very much important because content modeling is more with your unstructured data. Now, it might not be possible to establish the relationship between each of the data, attributes and do it because, a lot of these contents would be there. But what we do is normally we try to associate at a high level, right? So, for example, if you say LinkedIn profiles, how do we establish the relationships? We establish the relationships using an entity to entity, like between me and my wife, there could be a connection that I might have between me and my friends. I see there are connections, and then those friends can be having multiple friends. So I'm not doing at each of my data points level, like, maybe at things, but there could be different ways with which the relationships could be built in, based on the data that I'm trying to connect. Like, for example, if there is a video, so I see who are the people who are part of that video. And then when I see that entity is being established, then I can start sending notifications to the other people, my friend list, since they are already connected to me. But till the time, if I don't know who are the people in that video, I will not be able to send that. So these kind of things, goes around with the content models that you have. So you will have the first thing, like at a very high level, like at a website level. Then you can have it at a specific level, maybe it at a product level, or it could be at an individual level. And then the next level will be based on whatever the attributes, or characteristics associated with me, with the individual or with the product. So accordingly, you can start establishing the relationships between them. So, and this kind of things, see, because it might be capturing a lot of semi-structured data and unstructured data. So you try to take a combination of these different data types and try to associate them together. Then content delivery models, different types of content delivery models could be there. So one of the thing is the content that you might be having is will be modular, it will be structured, it will be reusable, and it could be device and in platform independent as well. So what these delivery methods might we will have to consider, which will include your web pages, your print, mobile apps, as well as the different types of ebooks that you might be having, which might be having interactive video and audio files. Now, converting them into a specific format or a specific language, like an XML language or a XSD languages, which help me to know that how I can start consuming and using them. Now, there are different types of content delivery models that you have. You have a push, pull, and interactive model. So push is, as the name suggests, is where the content is delivered at a predetermined time or a specific schedule. So push kind of things is like you have these RSS feeds, if so at a point in time, these feeds, notifications and feeds and all would be pushed to people. Even like, for example, if like I would be uploading this recording of this video. So every people who are subscribed to my channel will get a notification. So these are like your push. Now there is a pull delivery system where we are trying to consume whatever the data that we want, right? So when someone is going to YouTube and they start searching for these sessions, so then YouTube will try to show them this content. So it's a kind of a pull kind of a delivery system, right? And interactive is where, you have some of these and interactions between the different systems. Like, for example, you have the POS machines, you have these, payment systems and all, where you are trying to enter the values and then it sends a transaction to so if it's a fintech company, then it will send a, request to your bank and the bank will acknowledge and will send a response back. So these kind of things are where there is a interaction between the different channels across. These are your interactive kind of content delivery methods. Then you also have controlled vocabulary. So controlled vocabulary, as the name suggests, will have a list of all the terms that you might require to index, categorize, tag, sort of retrieve the content, right? So as part of your browsing and searching, you're trying to get these. Now, a controlled vocabulary is very much useful when you're trying to organize your documents, when you're trying to organize your records. Right? These vocabularies could be in the form of like a list, a simple list, you have linked list, you have a pick list, so these kind of will have also the synonyms, the thesaurus, tautology is part of it. So as part of it, it will be useful for your reference, right? So some of these references, like you have the Dublin Code, control vocabulary, that normally a lot of times organizations they use for as part of their catalog publications and all. So what are some of the things that it has, So the metadata aspects will include like the taxonomist or the librarian, which will be associated to them, who will be taking care of them these aspects. So vocabularies will be very much useful and will try to act like your reference data. So whenever you have these reference data kind of aspects, where you want to reference and want to capture these details, you would be able to get them. Now, vocabulary management, as I was mentioning, will be to manage these vocabularies, right? Because the vocabularies might be evolving over time. So managing them is also very much important. And within that, you have the ANSI, Z39 2005, which is one of a standard. This is an American standard, obviously, and that provides a lot of these guidelines with respect to the construction, the format, what is the kind of management of these monolingual kind of a control vocabularies that will be used. So it provides a lot of vocabulary management also. So using that, you would be able to improve the effectiveness of information storage, the retrieval systems. You will be having the web navigation systems and other environments also. That would be useful. And one of the very important or primary purpose of this vocabulary control would be to also get or achieve consistency in the description and content objects, right? So as vocabulary management is a kind of a function that tries to capture all of these components across managing the vocabularies, like what kind of language or information concepts might be there in the vocabulary, who is the audience for the vocabulary, what kind of processes that might be supporting, what rules would be required, why vocabulary is important, what is the best practice and standard that I'm using for creating the vocabularies. Is there existing some vocabularies that I can use and enhance them? So these kind of things you will start seeing that will be associated as part of your vocabulary management. Then you also have vocabulary views and microcontrolled vocabulary, wherein it's a kind of a subset within a controlled vocabulary, but there is a limited range of topics. It's like just like you have tables which might be having so much data and you create a view over top of it. So this is a very specific views that we can create. So maybe vocabulary that I want to create for my marketing business unit or maybe only specific for my finance. So those will be part of your vocabulary views. And micro-control vocabulary which will be having very specialized or highly specialized terms. So in the which I not be present in my general vocabulary as a whole. So I create them as a microcontrol vocabulary. Like for example, you have a medical dictionary. So in the medical dictionary, we can have subsets with respect to a specific medical terms and all. So those would be associated as part of my microcontrol vocabularies. Now we also have the terms and the pick list. So terms and pick list. So list as the name suggests, so they do not describe any kind of things. It's a list of terms that you might have. And pick list is primarily like you have these drop downs, right? A drop down list and all. So they will have the choices that will be useful. So normally, pick lists are very much useful when you're trying to categorize, or you know that these are the only list of terms that should be selected. So as part of my reference management, it becomes very much useful. Then you also have term management. Now, ANSI and ISO Z3919 2005, they defined the standard which is there. They defined term is more like one or more words, that could be associated with the concepts. So term, are it's basically you can say term management when you are what are the kind of a term or what are the kind of the how you're defining a term. So it could be having multiple contexts or multiple syntaxes as well. So you could be having multiple synonyms as well. So that is where one or more words you're trying to designate a concept that basically comprise your terms, right? And as part of my term management, I could be establishing relationship between the terms within my control vocabulary. There are different types of relationships that I can establish, like an equivalent term relationship, hierarchical relationship, or a related term relationship. The equivalent term relationship is where, the relationship we are trying to set up across my different terms in my control vocabulary. And that will try to lead to one or more of these terms to start using this term using the cross references which I can make, or the equivalent terms that will be available in a let's in a different function. So I try to give a kind of a cross references. You have the hierarchical relationship, which will help me to understand the kind of hierarchies. Like, for example, a hierarchical view of my entire aspects, like who is my parent, who is my child, and there would be the further granularity that I can define. So those kind of hierarchical relationships would be established. And then you also have the related term relationships, which will help me the associativity, understanding the associativity, as we have seen these concepts and data modeling. So associativity will give me to give as help me understand the associations, not the hierarchies, but the associations. Then you also have the synonym rings and authority list. So synonym rings and authority list are where synonym ring is, as the name suggests, the synonyms, the equivalent meaning terms that you might be having. So let's say, for example, if users who are searching on one of these terms, any of these terms, so they know there are some kind of an associations which are there. So it will help them in the retrieval, identifying the associations very easily. And authority list is very much useful, in their reference management. So these authority list has been something that has been approved by the businesses. So you know that these are the terms that are only approved ones. It's a kind of an authority list which is there. So when we want to facilitate retrieval of information within a specific range or specific domain, so we know that these are the authority lists that I can refer to. So these kind of things helps them in that. Now, taxonomy, if you see, is a very large term, with respect to when you want to any kind of classification or control vocabulary. So taxonomies are very much useful. Like, for example, you have seen about taxonomies of our humans or the species of animals. Like, so you have, mammals. Under mammals, there would be so much subtypes in it. I'm not good in biology, and I was weak in that, but that there's species, class, and subclass, all of it is there, right? So that is your entire taxonomy. So same goes with your content management. So in taxonomy, it's a kind of a structure where we are trying to outline the topics and the different types of subcategories within it. Now, taxonomies will help me to create that kind of a hierarchical kind parent-child relationships. So using that, I would be able to get it. Now, it is not always that taxonomy will be having hierarchical taxonomy. There could be a flat taxonomy also. So flat taxonomy has like no relationships across my control categories. So all the categories will be very similar or equal. So like, for example, list of my countries, so list of countries would be like a flat because these countries are not having any kind of hierarchies. But hierarchical taxonomy is where, these hierarchies will be maintained. There could be a rule that would be defined. Let's say, for example, I would be able to move up and down. Like you have your organizations, presence across the globe, across into your regions, then countries, then zones, districts, like so that level of hierarchies you can define. Then polyhierarchy is where it's more like a tree-like structure. So there would be more than one kind of a node relation rule. Now, for example, you have multiple childs. They could be belonging to a parent, or the child nodes may have multiple parents as well. So those parents will have like grandparents across them. So traversal paths, if you have learned these data structures, right? So you try to get the traversal paths, the minimum traversal paths and all we try to identify, right? Where we are able to identify the tree from which node to which parent, and we'll be able to create. So that's a polyhierarchy. Now you also have facet taxonomy. So facet taxonomy looks like a kind of a star kind of a things, star diagram. So where we have each of these nodes associated with the center node. So the facets are kind of the attributes of the object that you have. Like for example, uh, metadata, like each attribute that you have created, title, access rights, keywords, versions, and all, they are associated to a specific content object, right? So that's like a star in between. Like for example, I have a person, all my properties, my birth of date of birth, PAN number, Aadhaar number are associated with me. So that's like a phased taxonomy. Then you have a network taxonomy. So in a network taxonomy, what we have is we have both the hierarchical and the facet structures together, right? So a combination of your star as well as your network or hierarchical kind of a taxonomy will be creating your network taxonomy. Now, with these kind of taxonomies that will be existing, now we also have the classification schemes and tagging. Now, what are classification schemes? So classification schemes would be like your different codes that we would be using. Like for example, there are different types of classification classes that we can define. Like for example, you have the FIBO classifications, you have there are certain classification, the standard industry classification, SIC classifications. So they have defined certain kind of a taxonomy with respect to what are the classes, subclasses that needs to be followed, right? And then you also have taxonomies. Taxonomies are primarily the classification schemes that we are using for my online content terms and names, right? So like, for example, when it comes to social media platforms, the group in the users, the groups that they are associated to, what kind of associations that are being existing. So that is will be under your taxonomies. So they don't have a kind of a hierarchical structure or terms, but when these people, when we have these multiple entities, they are associated. So that is your specifically on your social media platforms and all, you have the taxonomies associated. Then we also have the thesaurus. It's a kind of a control vocabulary that we might be using for my content retrieval. So it has different characteristics of your synonyms, lists, taxonomies, which are part of it. And these thesaurus will try to provide information about each of these terms, what are the relationship to my other terms, right? Now, these relationships that you might be having could be hierarchical, like a parent-child relationship, and all, or it could be associated. So all of it would be part of it, right? So synonyms should be acceptably equivalent or should be useful. So it could be having the definition, citations, and all in that. Then across the thesaurus, they we can be which will be useful for organizing the unstructured content or under understanding the relationships between these contents across my different types of content, generators. So this would be also useful. Now, for that, for ontologies are very well and explained as part of my ISO 25964 standard. And again, the ANSI NISO standard, the Z39.19, it explains the ontologies and associated with thesaurus. Now, what is ontology? Ontology is a kind of a specific kind of a taxonomy where you're trying to represent a different set of concepts and the relationships within a specific domain. Now, ontologies are also useful. You might have seen the as part of my semantic web identification or the interactions that is happening across my semantic web. You might be seeing these ontologies. Now, ontologies languages, some of these are languages which are useful or popular are the Resource Description Framework Scheme, the RDFS, where you might be using these ontologies to encode the knowledge about some of the specific domains. And you might have also heard about OWL, which is a web ontology language, which is an extension of RTFS. So it provides a kind of a formal syntax for defining these ontologies. Now, ontologies describe the different types of classes, concepts, the individuals, instances, the attributes, relationships, and the events as well. And what it does is the ontologies is like a collection of all your taxonomies and the thesaurus of my vocabularies that you have. So it will try to relate to a taxonomic hierarchy of the classes and definitions. And there could be decomposing intelligent behavior that we might be having. Now, there are two key differences between taxonomy and ontology. One of the key differences that the taxonomy would be providing your data content classification, whereas you have like a data model, right? So it will to call out which is the entity, what is the attribute that belongs. So that is part of your taxonomy, right? Whereas in an ontology, even though you have the entity attributes contribute, contents aspects, but they could be completely mixed. So the metadata will help you to identify what kind of relationships will be there. In a taxonomy of data model, you will see that, the primarily, sometimes a lot of times we make some assumptions, what is defined, what is known is more associated. In an ontology, there could be a possible relationships that we might be inferring, based on the kind of a nature of the existing relationship, we can start inferring to the newer kind of relationship. This is also like your open world assumptions that you have. So these kind of things you'll start seeing when you're dealing with your taxonomy. Then, so here you can see how your taxonomy might be looking like, and how an ontology might be. So if you see, according to Bob Pater, and ontology is trying to identify and distinguish the concepts and the relationships, where it describes the content and the relationships, whereas in a taxonomy will try to formalize the hierarchical relationships among these concepts, and it will try to specify the term that needs to be used for referred to. Now, other kind of components or concepts that you will start hearing on this is first is documents. So documents could be in the form of physical papers, it could be form of electronic documents also. They will have certain kind of instructions with respect to a task, or it will be storing some data aspects. So these kind of things, documents will can try to communicate and try to share this information and knowledge. So all your procedures, protocols, methods, and specifications, all these are part of your documents. And a subset of your documents will be your records, right? So records try to provide evidences that the actions were being taken and the decisions were made in keeping with procedures. They can serve as an evidence of my organization, business activities, and regulatory compliance, right? Now, people will usually create records, but these instruments and monitoring equipment could also be useful, data so that we can generate these records automatically. So document management is encompasses its entire areas across the processes, techniques, and technologies that might be useful for controlling and organizing the documents and the records throughout my entire life cycle. So it might include storage, inventory, and control, both for my electronic and paper documents, and 90% of my documents might be electronic. There could be paperless documents that I might be using, which I might be creating. It might be more widely used. So there could be a full list of historical paper documents also. Now, if you see managing the life cycle of my documents and records, right from inventory creation, policy creation, classification. So if you can see, there are regulations that is also driving a lot of them. These steps that is mandated, right? So inventory creation, right from identification of the existing documents, policy creations, classifying of these documents or the records, then the storage elements aspect, the classification, preservation, and disposal, as I was mentioning. All these are very much important. Now there are, I mentioned about some of these standards, right, which speaks about document management. So, for example, you have the ISO 9000, which is and ISO 9001. So there are different components on these documents which it speaks about. Then you also have the records management. So these records management, because managing the records within the documents is very much important. So these records could be physical in the form of memos, contracts, reports, any kind of things, or it could be form of electronics like your emails, attachments, and all these kind of things. So all of this is part of your records that you might be having, right? And then you also have some kind of a rock which could be hybrid, like for example your X-ray films, right? So you have the physical films also, but at the same time you have the digital ones also nowadays, right? Earlier it used to be not used to be digital, it used to be physical, but now they are having the digital as well, records as well. Then you also have the data map and the e-discovery that is associated with documents, right? So data map will be where you're trying to create an inventory of all your data sources, applications, and environments of these documents. And e-discovery, as the name suggests, is where you're want to trying to identify, the discovery as part of the evidence, or it could be in the form of identifying or getting these, documents out. So these kind of things will be associated as part of a discovery. So there are global regulations that have different types of requirements that are associated. Like for example, you have the UK Bribery Act, you have the EU Data Protection Regulations, you have the Dodd-Frank Act, you have the FATCA kind regulations, factor compliances, foreign tax, account tax compliance acts, and all. So a lot of these are mandating to have these the e-discovery enabled across these documents. That is important as well. So you can see this electronic discovery reference model over here. So this electronic discovery reference model, or the EDRM model, which is being mentioned over here, it shows the data of the information governance aspects. So right from the e-discovery phases that you can see, these are again an iterative process, right from identification, preservation, collection, processing, review, analysis, production, and presentation. All these are different stages. That is part of it. Now, as part of my information architecture, we are trying to have this process of creating the structure for a body of information. So there are different components as part of it. So you have the control vocabulary, you have the taxonomies, ontologies, the navigation maps, metadata maps, search functionality specifications, the use cases, and the use flows. So this information architecture that you have and the content strategy together will tell you what aspect, what content would be managed, and the design phases will try to show you or tell you the how aspect, how it needs to be taken care. So for any of your document or content management systems that you will be having, we normally try to identify all the kind of the links, the relationships between the documents, the content that you have. We'll try to define the structure of the document. We'll try to have a kind of a storyboard as a part of a blueprint of my entire the documents that we have. So this is something that helps me to identify and manage all of these steps very easily. Then I can have a search engine, so through which I will be able to search. So it will give me a search functionality through which I will be able to retrieve these documents very easy. Uh, Then might have a semantic model. So semantic model is a kind of the modeling that we are trying to now capture and link these, concepts together, these relationships that we have. So semantic models will enable users so that we can ask questions of these informations. So we can try to get this mapping of my database tables, my views. I can know that what is the semantic model, what is the binding between these objects. We can have the cardinality domains, identifiers identified, and all these structures, data structures, the associations, form of interview, UML diagrams and all is all part of my semantic model. Now, semantic searching will try to focus on identifying and searching, giving me a search kind of functionality where I would be able to search, all of these contents very easily. So I can use an AI engine also to identify relationships. I can have some kind of associations that will help me to get all of these details together. Then it could be applicable for my unstructured data, structured data as well. So as we have seen that majority of my data nowadays are moving into my unstructured data formats like your either email, social media files, the XML files, the transactional logs, transactional messages, graphic images, digital images, video recordings, audio files, and all. So these are all your unstructured data. And workflows is more like your kind of a process flows that you have, right? So what are the steps that are involved, right from the creation processing. So what are the steps that are part of it and the people and the process that is part of it. So workflows, as you can see, will have different components, like for example, the creation, processing, routing, the rules creation, the administration part of it, the security components or security, data information capture, the electronic signatures, the deadlines, escalations, the reportings, the delivery aspects of it, all is part of my workflows, right? So it should be automated. It should be, we can have a content management system that can automate a lot of these components and associate the people associated to each of them. It should be repeatable. It should be maintained very well. Right? So these are some of the activities that you can see as part of my life cycle. So planning for my entire life cycle management. I plan for my records management. I do a plan. I do a content strategy development. I create content handling policies around that, right? So for each of them, I create policies with respect to the scope and compliance with audits, identification, protection, purpose and schedule that I would be creating. And then how do I respond to these informations with respect to the orders that I'm getting? And, because there will be lawsuits and all that might be associated. Then what are the requirements for on-site and offshore kind of a storage that we might have? How do I use and maintain the hard drive and all? Then across my email management's perspectives, then the proper destruction methods that we might be having. All of it will be part of my content handling policies that we will try to include. Then specific policies I can create with respect to social media, with respect to device access, handling how I would need to handle my sensitive data, how I require to respond to litigation. So different stakeholders would be part of it. And then I try to define what is my content information architecture looking like, right? So this content information architecture will have, the semantic web, the different information systems like the semantic web, search engines, the social mining web component, the record compliance, risk management aspect, the GIS, geographical information systems, the business intelligence units, applications, all of it will be there. So it primarily always kind of I create an inventory of my documents coming from these sources, how the processing, indexing, retrieval of mechanism will be working. Right, what kind of indexing that we might be having, how we'll be using the metadata components across each of them. So all of this would be part of it. Now, once we have this, then we try to manage the life cycle. So across my life cycle, so we have the different stages, right? From capturing the records and content, managing the version control, right? So across my managing my version control, we have my formal control, revision control, and custody control. So formal control will require some kind of formal change coming in from the formal authority. Revision control is more, a little less formal, but there could be different types of notifying stakeholders and versions that we might be required. And custody control, it might be the least formal control, where we are trying to merely requiring some of my safe storage and means of retrieving this. So we have an ANSI standard 859, which basically has these three levels of control of data defined based on the criticality. Now, there could be different types of levels of controls that we can define. So for each of these data assets that you have, you can go ahead and identify which could be formal, which could be revision, which could be custody controls. Then for the backup and recovery aspect, we will have to define, we'll have to manage the retention and disposal period, policies around that, and then how we can start auditing these documents and reports. A lot of these, what is the kind of an audit measure that we can have? So all of it will be useful as we define that. Then publishing and delivering the content, right from providing access and search and retrieval methods, delivering the acceptable, to some of my channels that we might be identifying through my websites, through my shared drives. So all of it is something part of it. For doing that, I might be requiring some kind of tools and solutions and technologies. First of all, I might require an enterprise content management system. Right? So there are different types of enterprise content management tools out there, which helps me in my document management and records management. So you have systems like Iron Mountain, you have systems like Newgen and all. They have, vendors, they provide these different types of content management solutions, document management systems that could be useful as well, you know. So these components, as you can see, document management systems, content management systems, which are part of it. So they have different types of capabilities across coming, right? So one is across your digital asset management, across the image processing. Then on your records management systems perspective, they have, right from retrieving and getting the data, e-discovery components, then long-term archiving these documents, and then how you create these vital records, so that we can start retaining these critical business records. And on the content management system perspective, it might be including steps that would be associated for collecting, organizing, and indexing and retrieving the contents. Then storing this, how you would be storing in the form of documents or splitting them into multiple components. And, then the document and content workflow associated to them. Then you might be using some kind of a collaboration tools, right, from that will help you the entire collection storage aspects across, so these kind of things will be required. Then control vocabulary and metadata tools, so you have the metadata repository, glossaries, dictionaries, enterprise, mental disorders, data models, taxonomies, all of it will be there. Others also you might use different formats which you are finalizing as part of it. Those will be there. So your XML formats, JSON formats, the RDF formats that we have seen. And then you sometimes use a litigation response playbook. So these all things might be coming in from your legal teams, right? I was mentioning that many different people would be part of it, right? So what are the techniques that you might require? So you might reach out to them and they will be helping you with a litigation response playbook. They might have the litigation response data map also that tells you for each of the data maps what are the kind of litigation responses that are mapped to each of the data sets. Now there are certain kind of implementation guidelines that are associated. So the entire purpose of an enterprise content management is to assess the readiness also, as well as identify what kind of areas that you want to mitigate. So you have a data management maturity assessment model that you can help as part of this process. So readiness assessment, you can also use the armors, the guard principles that we have, and there are different levels that have been defined, right? So as part of the maturity model, so you have the substandard, which is the level 1. You have the in development, which is level 2. You have essential, which is level 3, and proactive, which is level 4. So it basically defines this 4, and then you have the fifth, which is level 5, which is transformational. So level 5 levels of records management maturity model they have been defined. So each of them define some kind of a way. Like for example, in level 1, the concerns are not being addressed. They are very minimal. So in the level 2, in development, so you are starting developing these practices. In level 3, it becomes essential. So there are certain kind of minimum requirements that might be addressed so that it meets the legal and regulatory requirements. Then level 4, which is more proactive, you try to create this with a focus more on continuous improvement perspective. And level 5, which is more of transformational, you have integrated this into your corporate infrastructure and business processes. So there are different, each of these levels that has been defined. And then you also have the organizational cultural change that will help you to identify what kind of challenges people are facing, how to basically go ahead and try to establish and try to resolve these different challenges. On the document and content governance perspective, there are information governance frameworks that you can use, like for example, Tarma's Garb model or information governance reference model, IGRM model that you can use. Then you also have the proliferation of information's perspective. So proliferation of information is more where how you are trying to proliferate that information, how you can help avoid and manage the risk with respect to mishandling or leakage of this, the information that is coming in, right? And then content quality perspective, the partnerships that is required between your data stewards and the management professionals, right? All of it will be associated as part of my quality content perspective. So high quality content will help to improve and have a competitive advantage. And it also helps in organizing and having better organizational effectiveness perspective. Now, across them, you can have certain kind of metrics or KPIs that you can start measuring. So these could be more quantitative and qualitative measures that you can have, where you can start reviewing these organizational performance. You define them and then start measuring the organizational performance across each of these, right? So some of these KPIs, like what are the percentage of total documents that you've identified as corporate records? What are the identified records that have been declared as under my records control processes, or they have not been identified? And what of these total documents that we have as proper retention rules that we have defined? Some of these like metrics as example I was mentioning that you can start using as well. So this is something that I wanted to cover as part of the content management and records management aspect. And so this is again very interesting, very important kind of offering as part of any of your when you are doing any of your document management, content management. So these are different areas that you need to speak across, you need to check across when you are trying to implement this, practices, best practices on the content and document management within the organization. So I'm going to stop the recording now because this is something that we had. I hope you liked today's session as well. And